Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, text 18 to 20. Deho rathastva indriyasha
Deho rathastu indriyana
samvatsara rayogate
samvatsarorayogati
dvikarma chakrastri guna
dvikarma chakra stri gunaha
dvaja panchasu bandhuraha
dvaja pancha asubandhuraha
manorashmir buddhi suto
manorashmir budhir suto
Pinnidodbandhakubara
hata nidadvand kubaraha
Panchendriyartha prakshepa
pancha indriyer artha pakshepa
Sapta dhatu varuthaka
sapta dhatu varuthakaha
Akutir vikramabayo
akuti vikrama bhalyo
Mrigatrishnam pradhavate
mriga trishnam pradhavati
Ekadashendriya chamu
ekadash indriya chamu
Panchashana vinodakrit
panchasuna vinodakrit.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Nārada Muni continued, what I referred to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull that chariot. As time passes year after year, these horses run without obstruction, but in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The 5 types of life air constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the knotting place. The 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the 5 external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity, seated on the chariot, hankers after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word samvatsara, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year, the living entity becomes entangled in the chariot's progress. The chariot rests on 2 wheels, which are pious and impious activities. The living entity attains a certain position in life in a particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities, but his transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as progress. Real progress is explained in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Tyaktva deham panarjanma naiti. One makes real progress when he does not have to take on another material body. So the body, this body is compared to chariot, and the two wheels are pious activity, impious activity. And so sometimes we are doing pious activity, and then we are going to heavenly planets. Then we are doing impious activity, then we are going to hellish planet. Like this, we are transmigrating in the material world. Well, Prabhupada is helping us. He's pointing out that what is real progress? Real progress is that we get out of the cycle of birth and death. As stated in Caitaniya Caritamita, Madhya 19:138, Eta Brahmanda Bhare Ananta Jiva Gana 84 laksha yonite karaye brahmana. The living entity is wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in different species on different planets. Thus, he moves up and down, but that is not real progress. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether. So Caitaniya Caritamita is telling us what is progress. We may think, oh, I got the body of a demigod, so I'm progressing. But here, real progress means getting out. Because even the demigods, their planets are still within the material world. But then again, one may say, but I really have a desire that I want to go to the heavenly planet. Well, then Krishna does not interfere with that desire. Krishna does not force anyone. But if anyone wants to have this information of spiritual world, then that is available. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartino arjuna mam upaitya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So Krishna is saying that, so we may go down to hellish planets, or we may go to upper planets, and we may think, oh, there is so much enjoyment in the upper planets, so there is no misery. But Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita that birth and death is there even in the upper planets, even in the planets of the demigods. There is repeated birth and death. But Krishna is saying one who goes to the spiritual world, then there is no birth and death. So we should somehow or the other have the desire, oh, even I want to go to the spiritual world. Even if one is promoted to Brahmalok, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Thus, he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. So, the word wandering is used. We are wandering in the material world because we are, after all, spirit souls. So our real home is the spiritual world. Being illusioned, he thinks he's making progress. He is like an airplane encircling the earth day and night, incapable of leaving the earth's gravitational field. Factually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the earth's gravity. So Prabhupada is saying that, it's just there. We are just there. We are thinking we are making progress, so I'm going to the upper planet, so I'm making progress. But we are still within the material world. Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated in the body. The sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. So the soul, we are the living entity, the soul. The soul is inside the body in the area of the heart. And then what we are doing is we have the struggle for existence, karshati. In the words of Narottam Das Thakur, Karma Kan, Gyan Kan, Kevala Vishera Bhan, Amrita Baliya Ye Bakhaya, Nana Yoni Sada Fire, Kadarya Bhakshana Kare, Tara Janma Adapate Yaya. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity and mental speculation, and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kand and gyan kand, fruitive activities and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle for existence. So Krishna consciousness that's the solution out of this birth and death. Till the time we are in this birth of death, the struggle continues. Till the time we are in the material world, the struggle continues. But once we go to the spiritual world, then we are in our natural environment. In these verses, the words Mriga Trishna, I'm sorry, Mriga Trishnam Pradhavati are very significant because the living entity is influenced by a thirst for sense enjoyment. He's like a deer that goes to the desert to search out water. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that if he can somehow or other reach a certain point, he will be happy. That's what we are doing. No? Let me change this situation, I'll be happy. Let me change this, I'll be happy. Let me change that, I'll be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. He then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called Mriga Trishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. So we are thinking, let me change my situation, and I'll be happy in another situation. Let me change my situation, and I'll be happy in another situation. So in that, we are continuously thinking that we are going to find some sort of happiness here in the material world. Samvatsaras Chandaveka.
संवत्सरः चण्डवेगः
Kalo yeno palakshita.
कालो ये उपलक्षितः
Tasya tasya haniha gandharva.
तस्य अहानिः गन्धर्वा
Gandharvyo ratriya smrita.
गन्धर्वो रात्र्याः स्मृतः
Haranti ayu parikrantya.
हरन्ति आयुपरिक्रान्त्या
Shasti uttara shatatrayam.
षष्टि उत्तराशतात्रयाम्.
What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, page number 360. The word parikrantya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. So with each passing of day and night, our life in this body is reduced. Caitaniya Caritamita. Lokastam Nabhinandati.
लोकस्तां न अभिनन्दति
Swasaram Chakre Mrityu.
स्वसारं जगृहे मृत्यु
Shayaya Yavaneshwara.
क्षयाय यवनीश्वरः.
What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwar, Yavanraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Encaged within the body, the living being accepts Kalakanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshwar is the emblem of death, Yamraj. Before going to the place of Yamraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamraj. So Yamraj is death and his sister is Jara, old age. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanraj and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instructions of Nārada Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamraj and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. So one may say, oh, really? If I'm gonna, uh, engage in Krishna consciousness, I don't have to leave the body. No. Because the body we have to leave the body, but after leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material, but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma. This is how the devotee conquers death. That after he leaves the present body, he goes to the spiritual world. No need to take another material body. Adayo vyadhayastasya
आधयो व्याधयस्तस्य
Sainika Yavanaschara
सैनिका यवनाश्चरा
Bhutopasargashuraya
भूतो उपसर्ग आशूरयः
Prajvarudvividojvara
प्रज्वारुद्विविध ज्वरः
Evam Bahuvidher Dukhe
एवं बहुविधे दुःखे
Deva Bhutatma Sambhave
देवभूतात्मसम्भवे
Lishyamana Shatam Varsham
क्ष्यमाणा शतं वर्षम्
Dehe Dehi Tamovrita
देहे देहि तमोवृतः
Pranendriya Manodharma
प्राणेन्द्रियमनोधर्मान्
Atmani Adhyasya Nirguna
आत्मनि अध्यस्य निर्गुणः
Shete Kamalavandhyaya
शेते कामलवान् ध्यायान्
Mamaham Itti Karma Krit.
मम अहम् इति कर्म कृत्
The followers of Yavaneshwar Yamaraj are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvar represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity, subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. In the Vedas, it is stated, Asango hi ayam purusha. The living entity is actually separate from material existence, for the soul is not material. We are the living entity. The soul is the living entity. The soul is spiritual. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy and the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. So the superior and inferior energy. Material elements, the material energy is inferior because it's not conscious. Whereas we, the soul, we are superior because we're conscious. The material elements are also described as bhinna or separated energy. So bhinna, why is it called separated? Because Krishna personally does not associate with the material energy. Personally, Krishna is in the spiritual world. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to so many tribulations. In Bhagavad Gita 2.14, the Lord also says, Matra sparshas tu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkhada. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, and so on. The intestines, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. So, you know, how the living entity is suffering in the body. Heat, extreme cold, unhealthy food. And the Ayurveda says the body constituents is kapha, pitta, and vayu, and there's an imbalance in there, then there is disease, and different organs get different diseases. And this is how we suffer then. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid. When there is an extreme fever in the body, there is typhoid and pneumonia, and they are described as prajvar. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Miseries brought about by other living entities are called adhibhautika. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. So the three types of suffering: other living entities, our own body and mind, and natural disasters. Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home, back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. So, we go through a lot of suffering, but we don't realize it. Why? Because our consciousness is so fixed that I want to enjoy, that we don't realize how much we go through. But the same kind of we have this so much desire to enjoy the world. If that same desire somehow we change it to serve the Lord, then we can get out of here and actually enjoy eternally in the spiritual world. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations. And after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. So this kind of we have this obsession to enjoy the body, But if that same obsession we can transfer to serving the Lord, well, not in a fanatic way or not in a psychotic way, and there needs to be a balance, of course. Balance. Krishna says always do with balance. Eat how much you need, sleep how much you need, how much sense gratification, like Srila Prabhupada would say, it's like salt, we don't like food without salt. So how much sense gratification is needed, and it will be different for every person. So we need to find a balance, but yet, at the same time, engage in devotional service. And then, after giving up the body, go back home, back to Godhead. yadatmanam avigyaya
Yatatmanam avigyaya
bhagavantam param gurum
Bhagavantam param gurum
purushastu vishacheta
Purushastu visheshcheta
guneshu prakrite swadrik
Guneshu prakrite swadrik
gunabhimani satada
Guna abhimani satada
karmani kurute vasha
Karmani kurute avashah
shuklam krishnam lohitam va
Shuklam Krishnam Lohitam Va
yatha karma bhijayate.
Yatha Karma Abhijayate.
The living entity by
Sorry,
nature has, yes,
Shilpi, just once, Hare Krishna, just one question. So this is
yeah,
everything still the same. They are still explaining what was explained in the previous chapter, right? They are just giving a review and explaining it in little more. Now Narad Muni is explaining it to
yeah,
in right.
yes. The same story, the
Yeah,
story which he
but
said, he's now explaining it. So we can see that how important this
hmm,
thing for us to understand that it is repeated in Bhagavatam, you know.
yeah, it's completely repeating, so it's more understandable now. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, before he was saying it in a story form, and
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
he's explaining the story. So in further detail
Okay.
of what we are doing here in the material world, how our intelligence is, and then
Hmm.
what actually we should do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune. But when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body and, for the interest of the body, becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. These different types of bodies are explained in Bhagavad Gita 13:22. Purusha prakriti sthohi bhukti prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangosya asadyo nijanmasu. The living entity in material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. So, that's what we are doing in this modes. You know, our activities are influenced by the modes. And in this way, sometimes we are going in higher bodies and sometimes in lower bodies. Because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a variety of bodies from the 8,400,000 forms. It is clearly explained herein that the living entity has a little independence, indicated by the word swadrik, meaning one who can see his own welfare. So we have a little independence. The living entity's constitutional position is very minute, and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna has given us a free will. We can make a choice. And that choice actually is, do we choose to serve Krishna or do we choose to imitate Krishna? That's our choice. Are we choosing to imitate Krishna? Are we choosing to serve Krishna? And based on that choice, then depends, we are in the material world or in the spiritual world. That's why we are called marjana. So a servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master. And when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Sometimes he's a failure, and sometimes he's successful. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. There are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position, but to become like the Lord is not at all possible. We don't understand that God is not a post. Yeah, being Lord Brahma is a post. Somebody can become Lord Brahma. Somebody can become Lord Indra. Somebody can become Surya Dev, because these are posts. It's like President of America or, President of Taiwan, like that. Someone can, whoever's qualified, need qualification, of course, but can. But being God is not a post. That's something we have to understand. That nobody can become God. God is always God. But what we are trying to do, we are trying to imitate him. We are trying to become God. So, but it's not possible. Thus, there is a great struggle for existence with the material world as different parties try to imitate the Lord. So, this is our struggle for existence. We are trying to imitate Krishna, but we are not able to imitate him because we cannot imitate him. And that's why we struggle. Like a child is trying to imitate the father. He's seeing the father is lifting 20 kilos weight, and the child is struggling to imitate and struggling and struggling. He'll struggle. He won't be able to pick up. He's like just 3-year-old. How will he pick up 20 kilos? It's not in his capacity. Then someone may say, oh, yeah, but I'm going to grow up and then I will become the father. Then I will hold 20 kilos. But God, we can never become God. God is unlimited. We have to understand our position. We are Jivatma, souls. So Prabhupada is saying that he's explaining there's a businessman, he has a business, and his servant may leave him and try to compete with him. So this is what we are trying to do, compete with God. And we are thinking, okay, I'm not God now, but after I get liberated, I will become God. But that is also trying to imitate God. Because as we just said, being God is not a post. God is a person. We cannot become someone else. And because of this thought process, we struggle. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. The Lord is imitated by Mayavadi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. When the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of mental concoction. No one can become one with or equal to God. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. So we may think, I'm going to become one with God, I'm going to become one. But we can think all we like. That's just delusion, mental concoction. It's not going to happen. Why? Because nobody is equal to or greater than God. Nobody can become God. Krishna is saying the spirit soul is eternal, unchangeable, immutable. So we are spirit souls. We are eternal, unchangeable. Our individuality can never be lost. We are eternally part and parcel of God. And if we think that we are going to become God one day, then that is continuing with our material consciousness. That will keep bringing us back to the material world. Because the very reason we are in the material world is to give up this desire to become God or to imitate God. The very reason we are here is to realize ourselves. That's why it's called self-realization. Who am I? Okay. Shuklat Prakasha Bhuyish Sthal
शुक्लात् प्रकाशभूविष्टान्
लोकान् आप्नोति कर्हिचित्
लोकान् आप्नोति कर्हि चेत्
दुःखोदर्कान् क्रियायासांस्
दुःख उत्कार्ण क्रिया आयासान्
तम शोकोत्कटान् क्वचित्
तमो शोक उत्कटान् क्वचित्
Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Thus, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced by the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. There are three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. Those influenced by the mode of goodness are given places in the upper planetary systems, Brahmalok, Satyalok, Tapolok, Janalok, and Mahalok. So, three planetary system, upper, middle, and lower. Upper are the Brahmalok, these are the upper ones. Mahalok and above, they are called. Satyalok, Tapalok, Janalok, Mahalok. Those influenced by the mode of passion are given places in the Bhurlok and Bhuvarlok. So the Bhurlok and Bhuvarlok, mode of passion. That will be the earthly planets, the Swarglok will come there. And those influenced by the mode of ignorance are given places in Atal, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatal, Rasatal, Patal, or the animal kingdom. These are the hellish planets, the lower planetary systems. Qualitatively, the living entity is the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because of his forgetfulness, he gets different bodies in different planetary systems. So our quality and God quality, same. We are same as the quality is the same. But we have forgotten God. And that's the reason now we are taking these different bodies in the material world. We have forgotten we have a relationship with God. That's our ignorance. And that's why we are wandering in this universe, sometimes in higher planets, sometimes lower planets. At the present moment, human society is overly influenced by the mode of passion, and consequently, people are engaged in working in big factories. They forget how distressful it is to live in such places. In Bhagavad Gita, such activities are described as ugra karma, that is, distressful activities. Those who utilize the energies of the worker are called capitalists, and those who actually perform the work are called laborers. In actuality, they are both capitalists, and the workers are in the modes of passion and ignorance. So, the result is that there is always a distressful situation. In contrast to these men are those influenced by the mode of goodness, the karmis and jnanis. So, passion and ignorance. Here, passion, the capitalists, laborers, ignorance. Actually, both are in passion and ignorance because both have that, that the work, the desire, too much desire to work. And then goodness is the karmi and jnani. The karmis are the one who are under the direction of Vedic instructions, try to elevate themselves to higher planetary systems. They are doing pious activities, ritualistic activities. They want to go to the heavens. They're not much interested in activities of passion or ignorance, but they are more interested in pious activities. The Gyanis try to merge into the existence of Brahman, the impersonal feature of the Lord. So this is what the Gyanis are trying to do, to become God. In this way, all classes of living entities and various species of life are existing within this material world. This explains superior and inferior life forms within the material world. So we can see, wherever we go, we are influenced by the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Even if we go to heavenly planets, we are still, well, of course, in really the higher planets, and as we heard, Brahmalok, Tapalok, Janalok, and Mahalok, though they are in the mode of goodness. But they're still it's a material mode still. It's in the material world. Then the heavenly planets and the earthly planets, Burlok, Buvarlok, that is mode of passion. And the hellish planets becomes mode of ignorance. So no matter where we go in this material world, we are under the control of the modes of nature. And Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam is telling us to rise above these modes by hearing, by chanting. They are saying, come at least to the mode of goodness and then rise above the mode. Kvachit puman, kvachit stri.
Kvachit puman,
Kvachinno bhayam andade.
abhyam.
Devo manushyastiryagva.
Devo manushya tiryaka va
Yatha karma gunam bhava.
yatha karma gunam bhavaha.
Covered by the mode of ignorance and material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he's wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. Actually, the living entity is part and parcel of the Lord. Therefore, he is spiritual in quality. So we are part and parcel of Krishna. Part and parcel of Krishna. Sachid Ananda. We are the soul, we are not the body. When we are saying living entity, that's referring to the soul. So we are part and parcel of God. Living entity is never material, and his material conception is simply a mistake due to forgetfulness. He is as brilliant as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Both the sun and the sunshine are very brilliant. The Lord is like the full shining sun, and the living entities are like the small particles of that sun, which constitute the all-pervasive sunshine. So we are part and parcel of God. God is supremely energetic. He's the energetic, we are the energy. He's like the sun to help us explain, to help us understand. He's like the sun planet. From the sun planet is coming sunshine. So we are like that one molecule of sunshine. So the quality is the same. Both have heat and light, but the quantity is completely different. That is our position in relation to God. When these small particles are covered by the cloud of Maya, they lose their shining capacity. When the cloud of Maya is gone, the particles again become brilliant and shining. So the soul is very shining, very bright, because after all, it's part and parcel of Krishna. Just as there is the Brahma Jyoti coming from Krishna's body, so because we are part and parcel of Krishna, the soul is also having this light coming out of its body. But now we cannot see the light. Why? Because we are inside the material body. We have covered, like how we have a bulb and you cover it with a dark tape, and then the light can't be seen. That's what we have done to ourselves. As soon as the living entity is covered by the ignorance of Maya or darkness, he cannot understand his relationship with the Supreme God. Somehow or other, if he comes before the Lord, he can see himself shining like the Supreme Lord, although he is not as extensive as the Lord. So this is our position. We are not equal to Krishna, but we have the same quality as Krishna. Because the living entity desires to imitate the Supreme Lord, he is covered by Maya. We cannot imitate the Lord, nor can we become the Supreme Enjoyer. This is not possible. And when we think it is, we become conditioned by Maya. So we are in Maya. Till the time we think we can imitate God, we will continue to live here in the material world. It's not possible for us to imitate God. It's not possible. We do not have that that kind of what can I say, potency that God has. We are a tiny molecule of Him. How we could explain that? Like, if we see the whole beach, there's the whole ocean, but the beach is there, right? It has so many molecules of sand in it. So we are one of that tiny molecule, but God can be compared to the entire beach, you know. So, but when we think that we can imitate God, then we are in Maya. Thus, the engagement of the living entity under the clutches of Maya is brought about by forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. The engagement of the living entity under the clutches of Maya is brought about by forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. So we have a loving relationship with God. We simply have to revive it. And we can get out of this material world. The more we hear from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, the more we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The more we will be able to revive our relationship. Under the influence of Maya, the living entity becomes exactly like a person haunted by a ghost. Such a person speaks all kinds of nonsense. When the living entity is covered by the influence of Maya, he becomes a so-called scientist, philosopher, politician, or socialist, and at every moment presents different plans for the benefit of human society. So we are thinking, I'm this, I'm that, this, and this is how I can benefit human society. All these plans are ultimately failures because they are illusory. But then shall we stop all this? No, we continue because human society has to go on, you know. Everyone has to do their part. But understanding that this life is temporary, not that we sit down and do nothing. Each of us is going to act according to our nature, but understanding that, oh, I'm here in this body for a temporary while, and that I need to go back home, back to Godhead. In this way, the living entity forgets his position as an eternal servant of the Lord. He instead becomes a servant of Maya. In any case, he remains a servant. It is his misfortune that by forgetting his real contact with the Supreme Lord, he becomes a servant of Maya. So it's our choice. We want to serve God or we want to serve Maya. Serve, we have to, because that's our position. You know, when we say, I don't want to serve God, then we are serving Maya. Because the modes, they control us. We act according to the modes. And indirectly, we are serving God then. Why? Because who does the modes belong to? It belongs to God. So our choice is either we serve God directly or indirectly. As a servant of Maya, he sometimes becomes a king, sometimes an ordinary citizen, sometimes a Brahmana, a Shudra, and so on. Sometimes he is a happy man, sometimes a prosperous man, sometimes a small insect. Sometimes he is in heaven and sometimes in hell. Sometimes he's a demigod and sometimes he's a demon. Sometimes he's a servant and sometimes he's a master. In this way, the living entity wanders all over the universe. So at one point of time, we say, oh, why shall I serve God? I want to be God myself. Why should I serve him? I don't want to. Then we come in this material world. And in this material world, We take on so many different designations. We are put into so many different positions, different bodies. We're wandering over the universe. Only when he comes in contact with a bona fide spiritual master can he understand his real constitutional position. He then becomes disgusted with material existence. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, he regrets his past experiences in material existence. So, this is the, how do we say, the great fortune of meeting a pure devotee of the Lord by coming in contact with a bona fide spiritual master. One can revive his real constitutional position. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, he regrets his past experiences in material existence. This regret is very beneficial because it purifies the living entity of material conditional life. So when can we actually come to this point of regretting of being here in the material world? He then prays to the Lord to engage in his service. And at that time, Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. You know, so this is the position that we need to come to. Because we are here simply thinking, I'm the body, let me enjoy in this way, let me enjoy that way. But what we are doing instead, we're simply taking different types of bodies in this material world, completely forgetting that we are spirit souls, that we need to go back to the spiritual world. So Krishna, at that time, Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. So praying to the Lord to engage in service. And this prayer, Srila Prabhupada says, the Hare Krishna Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, is a prayer to the Lord, to the internal energy of the Lord. O Madhara, O internal energy of the Lord. Madhara, please engage me in the service of Supreme Lord, of Father Krishna. And then if we can pray in that way, we can chant in this way, then Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. Lord Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Devi hi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Because this material world, after all, she belongs to God. So God is saying, you surrender unto me and then you can come. But we are saying, no, I'm God myself. Why should I surrender to you? And in that way, we are continuing to be in the material world. If we really want to come out of it, we need to surrender to Krishna. Krishna is using this word surrender in the 714. Again, in 1866, he says, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. So Krishna is saying, surrender unto me. Then Krishna says that understand my form, my appearance, activities are transcendental. So that is surrendering to Krishna. Krishna is saying, whatever you do it for me. That is surrendering to Krishna. Krishna is saying, engage your mind in always thinking of me. That is surrendering to Krishna. So we can see in the entire Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling us, surrender to me. So that we can go back home. Krishna is eager to bring us back home, back to the spiritual world. And for our benefit, he has spoken this Bhagavad Gita. Only by the grace of Krishna can one get out of the clutches of Maya. It is not possible to get out by mental speculation or other activities. When the living entity understands his real position by the grace of Krishna, he keeps himself always fit in Krishna consciousness and acts accordingly. So we may try different processes. We may say, I will take the process of knowledge, or I may take the process of karma kand, or I'll take the process of yoga, but we have to take the process of devotional service, process of Krishna consciousness. Then we will be able to understand our real position by the grace of Krishna. Because Krishna's mercy is needed. We are attracting the mercy of Krishna by hearing and chanting. And then when one gets Krishna's grace, then one gets liberated. Thus, he gradually becomes completely free from the clutches of Maya. When he's strong in Krishna consciousness, Maya cannot touch him. In this way, in the association of Krishna conscious devotees, the living entity can get free from the contamination of material existence. So association of devotees is so important to get out of this material world. In this connection, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Tate Krishna bhaje, kare gurura sevana, maya jale chute paya krishnera charana. In the Krishna conscious state, the living entity engages in devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master. In this way, he gets out of the clutches of Maya and takes shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Caitaniya Caritamita, Madhya Leela, chapter 22, text 25. So, under the direction of the pure devotee, a living entity engages in devotional service. And in this way, he can get liberation, gets out of the clutches of Maya, takes shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. This is in Caitanya Caritamita. So surrendering to Krishna, engaging in devotional service under the direction of the pure devotee. Then in this way we can get liberated. We can go to the spiritual world. We can take shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. So we need to continue to hear from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Any questions or comments?
It is just that how they are again and again stressing on bhakti, devotional service and association. And then it again reminds that I remember you mentioned previously that there were two paths, like you can take the staircase or you can take the elevator. So the bhakti is like the elevator, and the gyan, karma, all those are like the stairs. They have the slowly and gradually, that's a process you reach.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
this one, you just go zoom up. You take the elevator, so you reach directly. You don't get
That's
tired.
right.
Like by taking the stairs, you might sometimes think that this is right or not. Am I right or not? I'm getting so tired doing this. But bhakti is that process where you just, and then as always, you say that bhakti is never lost. No matter how much you do, you start from there in your next life. So
Yes.
this is so important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare
Krishna
Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.